Let's say, if we consider that stealing is wrong, one of the greatest thieves in the history of mankind is the central bank.
Bitcoin is disrupting the world, and that is especially evident in what's going down in the South American nation of Argentina. The Paris of the South is now a country that has been ravaged by corruption and socialism for a century, and the economic turmoil is spilling over into widespread unrest. The people know that something has to change, and soon.
But your country is beautiful, abundant natural resources, intelligent, well-educated population, and yet its economy is in shambles. So clearly the system isn't working. How could anyone support that?
A ver, el problema es que Argentina empezó a abrazar las ideas socialistas hace más de 100 años. Argentina empezó a abrazar las ideas del socialismo y con una frase que luce muy atractiva, pero que es terrorífica en términos de funcionamiento del sistema económico, que es la idea que donde hay una necesidad nace un derecho. Y eso es un problema porque las necesidades son infinitas y los derechos alguien los tiene que pagar. Y el problema es que los recursos son finitos. Entonces, frente a la situación de necesidades infinitas y recursos finitos, aparece un conflicto.
As we move closer to mass adoption, more and more world leaders and political candidates have come out in support of Bitcoin and crypto. But perhaps none of them has been as vocal or colorful as Bitcoin-friendly candidate Javier Milei of Argentina. Recently, he shocked the world with a huge win in Argentina's presidential primary, and Bitcoin recently put in a new all-time high against the Argentinian peso. So it's time to take a little trip south of the border as we continue our quest to discover crypto. But first, go ahead and smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you can be along for the ride as we continue our adventure to discover crypto. While Bitcoin has been bouncing around the $25,000 range on the USD charts, it clocked in a new all-time high against the Argentinian peso. On August 15th, 2023, one Bitcoin traded at over 10 million Argentinian pesos. What's wrong with that math? Well, a lot. But before we get into the hot mess courtesy of the IMF, we need to set the stage for how the Paris of the South got into such a bad place. The Argentine peso was created in 1881 from the Spanish peso under the name Peso Nacional, and has been devaluing ever since. In 1970, the peso ley was introduced. Then in 1983, the Argentine peso was introduced. And in 1992, the current new peso, which at the time was meant to be convertible into dollars, was introduced. At that time, 1 ARS was equal to 1 USD. Confused? That's okay. It's hard to keep track of all the lies the big banks are telling you, but all you really need to know is that fiat has failed over and over again in Argentina. Today, it's happening again. 1 ARS has fallen to a third of 1 penny, a 99% loss in dollar value in just 30 years. Given this troubled history of economic crises and mismanagement of the currency by the central bank, it is not surprising that Argentina had to take out loans from the IMF, and it's also not surprising that since their currency is dying, they've struggled to pay it back. The struggle is real. The inflation rate in Argentina just hit 124%. Monthly inflation is pushing past a staggering 10%. That means the ARS is losing 3% of its value a day. What does this look like day to day? That means 1 liter of milk costs 377 pesos. Monthly rent for a 900 square foot apartment is 221,438 pesos. And buying a cheap car like a VW Golf costs 8 million pesos. If you paid in cash, that would mean you have to carry 20 pounds of paper 1,000 peso bills to make the purchase. The International Monetary Fund is one head of a dirty money hydra that has been plaguing the earth ever since the Great Depression. The World Bank and BIS are the other two predatory central banks that have gone out of their way to impoverish countries and subjugate millions, all to line their own pockets. The IMF Executive Board approved the 30-month extended arrangement for Argentina under the Extended Fund Facility in an amount of 44 billion US dollars. I think it's a little sketchy that the IMF refers to their loan agreements with entire nations as arrangements. Gives off mafia vibes. But whatever you call it, that's a lot of debt to have to pay back in your national currency, especially when inflation is bleeding you dry. As the fiscal situation in Argentina has declined, the relationship with the IMF has gotten pretty tense this year as well. On July 5th, 2023, it was announced that Argentina would push loan repayments due to the International Monetary Fund in July to the end of the month. The payments owed totaled $2.6 billion US. The cash-strapped country bundled its June payments in a similar way, as it is permitted to do, and paid partly in Chinese yuan as it suffered a shortage of dollar reserves. Then at the end of July, Argentina and the IMF agreed to a last-minute deal to prevent the troubled South American economy entering into arrears with the fund and offering some stability ahead of its October crucial presidential elections. Arrears is a fancy way of saying you're late on your debt payments, which isn't a good look if you're running a re-election campaign. So the IMF decided to help them out a little bit more. Then finally, last month on August 4th, it was announced that Argentina's government had reached an agreement with Qatar for a $775 million loan of oil money. A loan Argentina planned to use to make an International Monetary Fund repayment due on Friday. It's sad to see a whole country desperately trying to get loans like someone who's broke trying to come up with rent money. But that's what central banking does to people. They bought themselves enough time to make it to the elections in October, but Argentina is still grappling with severe economic crisis, sky-high inflation, falling central bank reserves, and is still going to be facing further IMF repayments after their election. And since their credit is basura with the IMF, Argentina, like many other countries, has turned to China to bail them out. The country's economy minister, Sergio Massa, is running for the president of the ruling political party, the Peronist Coalition. He has blamed Argentina's struggles to pay back its debt on a severe drought, which wiped out more than $18 billion of expected export earnings this year. Massa also said Argentina would not use a single dollar of its own reserves to make the IMF repayment. So instead, it's going to go into more debt. So the situation in Argentina is dire, but there is a revolution coming, and part of that change is coming in the form of former soccer player, rock and roll singer, and economist Javier Milei. Milei is the current frontrunner to be the next president, and he sees a lot of potential for Bitcoin being the next catalyst to fix all the problems socialism has caused in his beloved country.
Porque esto es interesante, el socialismo es siempre y en todo lugar un fenómeno violento, asesino y empobrecedor. Esa es la característica del socialismo.
Javier Milei is a self-described libertarian and anarcho-capitalist who only entered Argentina's Congress in 2021 and won the August primary heading into the presidential election in October. Even by the standards of Argentine politics, he's an eccentric character for sure, and I'm pretty jealous of his hair. Milei wants to privatize all the state-run companies, dollarize the economy, and reduce the country's deficit to zero in his first year. The political and economic models he likes the most are Australia, Israel, Ireland, and New Zealand. An interesting mix, but it seems like he knows what he wants. For years, talks of free market capitalism has been a guaranteed vote loser in the bloated statist political climate of Argentina. Past attempts to pursue similar political agendas have all failed, but this time seems different. It's become clear to many of the people in Argentina that what they've been doing in the past is just simply not working. Argentina needs saving. Annual inflation of the Argentine peso has reached a catastrophic 113%, and the peso's black market value against the dollar has fallen by 50% so far this year. And as Elizabeth Warren knows better than anyone, the black market is never wrong. It seems that after decades of economic mismanagement, Argentines are fed up with their politicians and with the central bank fiat debt. A win for Milei this year could signal a lot of sweeping economic reforms, and many have suggested those reforms may well involve Bitcoin, just like we saw under President Bukele in El Salvador. Only time will tell, but one thing is clear. When it comes to Bitcoin, Javier gets it. He said, quote, "Bitcoin is a natural reaction against the scam of central banking." I couldn't have said it better myself, Javier. Here in the US, the world capital of central banking fiat, there are a lot of politicians openly supporting crypto and Bitcoin, and this is critically important. Make sure you educate yourself about where your representatives stand on crypto, and make sure your voice is heard when you cast your vote. Okay, so why are so many people predicting that Argentina is going to follow a similar trajectory to El Salvador? Well, the answer to that really comes down to their national currencies. The Republic of El Salvador was founded in 1841, almost 2 centuries ago, and until 2000 had the Salvadorian colon as its national currency. On January 1st, 2001, however, the US dollar was effectively declared the national currency, with the exchange rate of the colon set at 1 USD for 8.75 Salvadorian colones, and within a few months, the Salvadorian national currency had ceased to circulate in the country. It was replaced by the US dollar in a process known as dollarization. Sounds expensive, because it is. 20 years later in 2021, Bitcoin was also declared legal tender, and so El Salvador now has 3 currencies: a colon that is no longer in circulation, the US dollar, and Bitcoin. It should be noted, however, that the introduction of Bitcoin has not affected dollarization very much, as the US dollar remains by far the most widely used currency. For now, anyways. So the path Argentina could be on has been done, and so far in El Salvador, it's working, sort of. On October 22nd, the first round of presidential elections will take place in Argentina. As we said, Javier Milei is leading in the polls, and he's already promised to proceed with dollarization if he wins. But the Argentine peso is in such a weak state that regardless of which candidate wins, there's a strong chance they could also implement dollarization. However, Milei is also a strong supporter of Bitcoin. Therefore, if he wins, Argentina can not only abandon its national currency and proceed with dollarization, but it may even end up following El Salvador's lead and make Bitcoin its legal tender. This would be huge for crypto adoption, as Argentina has a population of almost 46 million, while El Salvador only has 6.5 million. And Argentina's GDP is 26 times higher than El Salvador's. For those keeping score at home, currently only El Salvador and the Central African Republic have declared Bitcoin legal tender. But there are other large countries like Turkey or Venezuela where the national currencies are also facing severe pressure. I think this is another one of those Ernest Hemingway, gradually then all at once type of situations. There is no way of knowing if or when Argentina will make the move to make Bitcoin legal tender, but as fiat currencies begin to fail and more people lose faith in central bankers, the temptation to escape into Bitcoin is only going to get stronger. I think that's when the dam breaks, so to speak. It won't just be 1 or 2 nations adopting Bitcoin, but dozens all at once. And that, my friends, is why we're here to discover crypto. But that's just what I think. Let me know down in the comments what you think of all this. Do you think Javier Milei will win in October? Which country do you think will be the next one to adopt Bitcoin as legal tender? Leave me a comment down below and I'll see you at the top.